The great managerial search of 2023. I almost said 2003. 2023 carries on. A former big fish is in town. Can the Guardians reel him into Cleveland's side for a change? And we have to get to an Arizona Fall League update today.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. We have more managers to talk about because that's all the news was today. We did not get to the AFL yesterday. Two quick notes at the top. Someone asked about Petey Halpin. Petey Halpin is not Rule 5 eligible, so I'll just throw that out there. There is no plan for him because he's kind of got to show that he's someone you got to plan for. And then number two, I want to do a quick shout out to Frank Howard, who never played for the Guardians, but is an Ohio guy, All-American in baseball and basketball at Ohio State. One of the few guys drafted in the NBA, not in MLB because they didn't have a draft back then. But yeah, the only time that guy was drafted was for the NBA, not for the MLB. One of the great home run hitters. He was proto Adam Dunn. So a shout out to Ohio's own there and Frank Howard. May he rest in peace. And yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to throw out at the beginning before we dive into managerial stuff. We will not be discussing Mookie Betts' statements today or ever. So I'm just going to tell you, you can roll past that if you want to put that in the comments. We're not doing it.
It's so sad. I wanted to bring up yesterday too, if anybody caught the Friends reference at the beginning of the show too. I wanted to throw this article in here. The Friends and baseball crossover. Matthew Perry was a huge baseball fan and donated to the Field of Dreams building youth fields, but Wilmer Flores of the Mets at the time, Freddie Galvis of the Phillies at the time, Luis Severino of the Yankees, all talked about how they learned to speak better English because they watched the show Friends. So there's a lot of baseball players out there who, went to the U.S., watched U.S. television, and they improved their English as a second language skill by watching Friends. So never underestimate the impact of Friends and its cultural impact. And rest in peace, Matthew Perry. One of not my favorite show anymore, but it was one time my favorite show, and it's still up there for me. I know a lot of people aren't super huge fans of it, but I can tell you, if you ever wanted to debate me on Friends trivia, I can kick your butt somewhere. I don't think the Guardians and Craig Counsell are discussing the show Friends. Maybe they are. Who knows? Maybe they're secretly closet. We were on a break fans, or they think that Ross and Rachel were on a break. I am very curious to see.
It was a break.
They were on a break. Okay,
Yes,
I agree. I think they were on a break because he didn't want to read 18 pages back in front. Anyway, we know Terry Francona brought in, what was it, an 11-page some sort of manuscript manifesto, as it was written, about what he wanted to do and coaching philosophies with Cleveland. I don't think Craig Counsell is going to need a 20-page booklet with him to impress Cleveland, as he was in for his interview.
Isn't it
on
kind
Monday?
of...
He's
sorry. Complete your thought, and then I'll throw my thought.
He's moving on to New York at some point this week. I think the real interesting thought here is who's interviewing who, because obviously Craig Counsell is well in play. Like, Milwaukee wants to keep him, even though extension talks back as far as last offseason broke down between him and the team for whatever reason. We can get into that. The Mets clearly want him, and Cleveland obviously is quite interested as well. So I don't think I really, like I said, who is interviewing who? Is it Cleveland interviewing Craig Counsell, or is it Craig Counsell is asking, why should I come to Cleveland? Like, I think that's probably more of how the conversation's going.
So two responses to that. One, it is Craig Counsell interviewing Cleveland. The general feeling here in Milwaukee is that he is going to go back. At least people I talked to in the area and some of the things I've read. This feels like his negotiations kind of fell apart and he stopped negotiations. So there is a feeling in Milwaukee, true or false, we'll see, that he is going to Cleveland and then New York. So he'll go to Cleveland, which paid their manager well, get one offer, go use that in New York to get an even higher offer, come back home, and then use that to get the best offer possible. So we'll see if that is true or not. It is an interesting order. And I do want to throw out there, isn't it kind of funny, that story about Tito having the big book? Because doesn't it feel like every other story about him made it sound like he has never even read a 20-page book? So, it is interesting where he came in so super prepared. Then everything else after that was about like making him seem like, shucks, and not knowing. So it's just kind of an interesting, this is not me like debating or demeaning. It's more me being like, it's interesting how that narrative shifted and changed.
Well, that was intentional for him too. That was his style. He was always self-deprecating that way, and that was always intentional. Definitely a lot smarter than I think he was ever trying to let on publicly. Because I forget where Chris Anthony went to school, but obviously I think we know Chernoff went to what, Yale? Was it Yale? Harvard? Princeton?
No, it's Princeton.
Okay,
right, that's where because isn't that where he played with or roomed with Venable?
Oh, that's right. So it was Princeton. I forget where Antonetti went, but yeah, I don't think a Princeton GM is hiring
Georgetown.
That's a good school. It's not an Ivy League school, but it's a pretty darn good school. I don't think guys that smart are hiring someone to coach for them who's an idiot. So yeah, you can think whatever you want there, but a lot of that was probably brought on by himself. Do you really think, by the way,
went to Georgetown for his PhD, so that's why I have to make a Georgetown joke there.
Do you really think that Milwaukee is going to wind up being the team with the highest paid manager? Because that's where this seems this is headed, right? This is where it seems like there's probably nobody in baseball who's going to get paid more than Craig Counsell, whether he ends up in Cleveland or New York. But do you think Milwaukee is the franchise that's going to wind up being a team that is paying the manager the most money in baseball?
So here's the thing. It may not be in the end about being the most money in baseball. It might just be about leveraging two spots to get the most money possible where you want to be. So he might not end up the highest paid guy. It might leverage, and then getting more money in Milwaukee. And that's not to say that he's for sure going to stay, but I think what we're seeing is a situation where he is certainly setting this up to kind of try to leverage the situation. And it'll be, it's fascinating. I don't know, again, how much. Like I said, I just, if he comes to Cleveland, it's going to be a shocker to me because he is just, I don't know. It just feels like everything has been set up for him to not necessarily be that guy with just the way things have played out the past few years. I understand Cleveland is a situation where like it is stability and it's a team, every all-in approach, but I'm still going to be surprised. I'm just, in my mind, this is all about leverage for what you really want.
I think there's definitely an element to that, but I think it's also, the grass isn't always greener. I mean, I'm sure he likes the grass in Milwaukee. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed as long as he has so far. Things are going well.
Are you implying that's not legal in Milwaukee? Oh, I'm sorry.
Could be legal in Cleveland as of next week. We'll see.
I think it's eventually going to be. I think it's a similar situation. I know I should be. I'll see what's on my ballot. Let's put it that way when I have to go.
Yeah, that's not in your Jace case there.
No, it's not. No, it's not at all. We love Jace. I'm not implying anything. It is not in my case. Justin just got us canceled from the network.
Yes, I'm sure. No, but I think. I do think this is a lot of leverage too, but I think it's also finding out, is Milwaukee the best place to win? Does he, because some guys do want to change. Like think about Mark Shapiro in Cleveland, right? He was the GM and then moved on to president of baseball operations for, I forget how many years at this point. It was like 2003 to 2014, and then 15 he shifted over to or it might have been 2012 even, or 2013. He shifted over to like the business side of Cleveland, or of the franchise. And then he got the itch to want to go back into baseball. So he goes to Toronto. Like guys do always sometimes want to see what else is out there and possibly find another opportunity. It's happened everywhere. So I don't think, anybody would do this. This is what you do when you're searching for jobs. Maybe maybe not so much you in the teaching industry, but everybody else, I will say.
I mean, here in Milwaukee, that's even something I see people doing because there's a shortage, right? So people sometimes...
Well, I mean, but you're exploring your options to see what's out there. Are you happy where you're at? If you're not 100% happy where you're at, I mean, I can say this as somebody who is thinking about applying for their jobs. Again, hopefully nobody from my work is listening to this, but I think you're always looking for better opportunity if you're not 100% happy where you're at. And I'd be curious to know, we talked about off the air a little bit that the negotiations between Counsell and Milwaukee, quote unquote, broke down at some point during the season. They wanted to go focus on the regular season at that point. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. And I don't know, how much. I don't think we're ever going to find out why. I guess maybe if he leaves Milwaukee, maybe we will. But I think that would give us a lot of insight into why he's been allowed to quote unquote still be under contract with Milwaukee and allowed to interview other places, but also why he'd be looking. We got a couple other questions we want to talk about in terms of the Craig Counsell situation, coaches who may or may not be available as a result of all these openings, and there's some interesting AFL stuff to talk about with the Guardians prospects, so stick around. And while you do that, this coming week, things are going to get more interesting in the NFL. You got a lot of quarterbacks out, got a lot of interesting things going around. You got ACL tears and guys who are not playing for the third week in a row all across the NFL. But you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, customers get a $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bets. All you got to do is make a moneyline bet and win $5. You'll get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. And of course, there's a lot of things you could do. You can do spreads, player props, over under, but the thing you want to do is the money line on the team you believe in. Win $5, get that extra $150 in bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And game 4 of the World Series. I almost said I wish it was still the ALCS. Game 4 of the World Series coming your way on Halloween. So listen to that on your Sirius XM app while you're handing out some candy. Favorite Halloween candy? Did we talk about this?
We did movies. We didn't do favorite Halloween candy.
I will not accept anything other than Reese's. There's no. Unless you're allergic to peanut butter, then
which
I guess
my son is. So my son is allergic. I mean, it's a murderer's row. It's eggs, milk, and peanut butter. So we have a lot of alternatives.
Dairy-free chocolate, yeah.
And I'm learning a lot of things. I don't know. I like a lot of things. I always here's my old man one. I've always kind of liked dots. I know. And
I had braces as a kid, so I couldn't eat those. So.
Can I want to throw a little bit of an off tangent thing real quick in here. So one of our commenters said that it shouldn't be that hard to find 2 right-handed outfielders who play decent defense and hit at least 20 home runs a year. Can I read you the list of right-handed outfielders who hit 20 home runs last year?
Yeah, go for it.
It's Fernando Tatis, or the last 2 years, I'm sorry. Fernando Tatis, Randy Arozarena, George Springer, Teoscar, Mookie Betts, Julio Rodriguez, Adolphus Garcia, Ronald Acuna, and then Nick Castellanos, who you then can't count because he has terrible defense, and Hunter Renfroe, who also has terrible defense. And then his next statement was who has to hit 265. So then we have to eliminate Renfroe because he has a career average under 240. Springer, who hits just about 265 or under. Fernando Tatis hit under 265. And the last 2 years, Randy Arozarena hit under 265. So people think
they're all stars.
Everyone thinks it's so easy to find 2 right-handed bats who hit 265 and play decent defense. No, it doesn't exist. I don't know how many times we can say on the show, this is really hard to find. The entire list of guys who do that is Teoscar Hernandez, Mookie Betts, Julio Rodriguez, Adolphus Garcia, and Ronald Acuna. I can't say his name today. 5 dudes, and you want to get 2 of them, and 3 of them are MVP candidates. No, I don't know how many times we could state this. That is not the way the game is. This isn't the 1990s anymore. I don't know how many times we can sit back and be like, and listen, I love you, Bruce. You're an everydayer. I appreciate your comments, but we get so many comments like this. They need power. It's like,
Everybody needs power.
Like, it's just not out there. It's hard to get. It's hard to add. And if you want to question why they don't try to like draft it, that's a valid question. Outside of Ralphie Velazquez, I don't think they've drafted anyone with, above average power in the last 3 years. There's international signings are all contact guys. It's like, that is where you maybe question it. But you got to understand, this doesn't exist anymore. Like, someone's like, get one of them through a trade with Shane Bieber. Well, Teoscar's a free agent, as is Renfro, I believe. None of these other guys is Shane Bieber getting you. That just doesn't exist.
That's for Shane Bieber. I'm in. Do it right now. The Dodgers need pitching. The Guardians need hitting. It's a match made in heaven. I say just do it. Press your are there still staple stores around? Press your easy button. Or I don't think I've seen a staple store in like 20 years, but find an easy button. They're out of business. Steal the easy button. Send the trade in. Mookie Betts for Shane Bieber. We're all in. Thanks for the inspiration on that. Yeah, I didn't realize all those guys you mentioned were all-stars. That is,
it's just
the only way to do it. The only way to do it is by developing internally, especially when you're Cleveland. Like, the Dodgers paid to keep Mookie Betts, obviously, but they traded for him first, and the Red Sox took a pretty awful haul to get him. Verdugo's been okay. Yeah, I don't know. You can try to trade for it. It's going to be expensive. The best way for Cleveland to do it, like, the Red Sox didn't even keep Mookie Betts. The Red Sox, they traded him to get into the luxury tax. You think Cleveland's going to do that? No. Like, your best chance is to develop them. And like you said, like, that's the funny thing about this whole. We didn't plan on talking about this today. That's the funny thing. Now that you brought this up, is that you can probably find. This is not, again, I don't want to knock Stephen Kwan because he's a good player. He's a solid player. If he was Cleveland's third best outfielder, they'd be in good shape. But he's not. He's their best outfielder. And again, this is not to knock Stephen Kwan. But you could probably go into the free agent market. We're talking about how many free agent catchers there are not this offseason and trying to figure out who the heck's going to be the backup catcher for Cleveland. Don't say it, Jeff. Don't say it because I'm going to get mad.
Cam Gallagher.
No. I said don't say it. I'm going to take all your dots. I'm going to smash them tomorrow.
It's fine. You can still eat them after they're smashed. That's the best thing about dots. You don't have to worry. They just kind of
they're disgusting.
Small versions.
All Reese's. You could probably go on the free agent market or trade for somebody, Stephen Kwan, right? Like there are an abundance of players like that out there. There are, like you just said, there are not a lot of Mookie Bettses and Ronald Acuñas, and realizing that they're also hard to develop. But if you think that the acquisition cost of a Stephen Kwan or a Brian Rocchio or somebody of that skill set is a lot more common, a lot easier to find and develop because they're safer. Would you agree they're safer profiles?
Yes.
So they're more likely to reach their peak, which is an average major leaguer, which is being an average major leaguer is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. You need them. But you would think that being the power hitter is like literally pitching too. Pitching's very expensive. Cleveland does that well. But you would think that developing power would be like priority number one for Cleveland because it is one of the most expensive things to go out and get if you don't already have an organization outside of pitching because they already have the pitching thing figured out. So why do they keep focusing on I know that why they keep focusing on the contact guys because it's because they think they can teach them power. Maybe they can. They will find out. But it is odd that one of the more expensive skills to acquire in baseball is power. And arguably one of the most important. And they don't really focus on it. They don't really think about it. I don't know. It's very weird. This is not what we intend to talk about at all. But now that you brought that up, I find that very odd to think about.
It is. So I'm kind of, I don't know. It's giving me some weird things. I guess Aaron Judge as well. For some reason, he didn't pop up on my original populated list. There was some
so easy to find Aaron Judge.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, so if for some reason, I guess because he was mostly a DH this year, they didn't list him as an outfielder because of his injury. So, but I mean, it's like you go down, just right-handed bats who hit 20 or more home runs this year, total in baseball, there were 62. 62 right-handed hitters across all positions who had 20 home runs.
Not just outfield. Yeah, not just outfield,
just
right?
All positions, 62 total.
Yeah, it's hard.
Which
makes you think Cleveland should be more apt to be targeting these kind of players if they can to the draft. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting point. Real quickly before we move on to our topic, I guess we can just leave it to one question, but I'm always curious what running these meetings with a managerial candidate, like, what are you asking? Like, I've been through enough interviews in my professional life that are not obviously baseball related. But like, what's the number one question you're asking a manager if you're interviewing him for a managerial spot? What are you asking him? Because I think this sort of uniquely applies to you, actually, Jeff, as a teacher. Like, isn't classroom management something you guys get grilled on quite a bit as teachers? And I think classroom management's not completely different than clubhouse management, even though you're dealing with, 30 millionaires versus 30 teenagers. But you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I before I get into that, I also want to say again, man, FanGraphs is screwy. Michael Taylor did have 20 home runs this year. He had 9 the year before. So
did he hit 265?
He did not. Adam Duvall had 20 this year and 12 the year before. So again, doesn't hit. And Giancarlo Stanton has had 20 the last few years, but I don't think he counts as an average defender. And then Chas McCormick also did have 20 this year after 14 and 14. So FanGraphs is being a little bit weird. To go back to your question, so this is where I excel in interviews because my background is behavior. I started out working with children with autism in a one-on-one setting at a clinical setting. Then I moved on to a school setting in New York for 6 years with that. And then I moved on to working with, at the time was labeled EBD, emotionally behaviorally disturbed children, for 2 districts as my primary job. So what I excel at, my superpower as a teacher, is dealing with the really hard kids that most people struggle with, and building rapport and relationships and putting together systems that work for those kids. And that's my day-to-day job. And when I go into an interview setting, it's always like, basically, I don't know, in some ways I get to be like the prize free agent. I get to be in this Craig Counsell seat because every school is like, how do we deal with these kids? And I come in with, well, this is what I have done. And this is what has been successful. So I'm sure there's a degree of that. And then the other question that's very much like teaching is, instead of like how you're going to get more wins, it's how you're going to improve test scores and how you're going to raise that overall floor, not just the ceiling, but the floor of your players and the ceiling. Take those who are already up here, get them higher, but take the ones at the lower end and bring them up. How are we going to turn, Miles Straw into a league average bat? Can you see in that? I don't know if that's possible. That might be, an impossibility question.
I would like to hear
think it is.
Craig Counsell's answer to that.
But yeah, I think there's some degree of that. There is definitely, but I think it's like beyond all of that, the one thing that doesn't always come up, interestingly enough, in teaching, and I've only been in one toxic environment. I'm currently not in one, thank goodness. Is like, how are you going to interact? Like, how is this going to be an all team approach, which I think is important for Cleveland in particular? Like, how are you going to integrate? We have one of the most established front offices in baseball. We have essentially like 2-3 GMs at the top. One of them is like one of the next GMs in waiting with James Harris there. It's like, how are you going to interact with people you've never met who are really well regarded across baseball? And for Craig Counsell, how are you going to deal with a fan base that on some level still secretly hates you?
That is true. That is hard, very hard to get over. I've got one question I would be curious to hear Craig Counsell's answer on, or just in a managerial interview in general. So we'll get to that in just a second. And while you're passing out candy on Tuesday, make sure you've got your Sirius XM app pulled up to listen to Game 4 of the World Series. Although by the time on the East Coast, if you're living on the East Coast, by the time the World Series starts, you're probably done passing out candy. So
we did trick or treating Sunday, so none of that here.
Oh, I have it tomorrow, so but by 8:00 it'll be over, so I guess it won't matter.
Ours was 1 to 4, 1 to 4, nice and early for the youngins.
That makes sense. Well, the sun is still out. It's not wet and dark and cold, rainy. The thing I would ask Craig Counsell, I don't know if it's fair necessarily, because he just came off of a year where he, managed a playoff team, and he's been managing a team for a long time. But maybe this is influenced by how Francona's interview went. But is it fair to ask him questions about the Cleveland roster and what he thinks of them and how he would handle things? Because I don't think Craig Counsell, like Bobby Valentine, obviously went very horribly, and he had no knowledge of the Cleveland roster. And he had a press conference after and oddly admitted that. You can go back and listen to Zach talk about that in one of our previous episodes, the Bobby Valentine disaster. I don't know if it's fair to ask Craig Counsell like specific questions to the Cleveland roster while he's interviewing, but I definitely would be curious to hear his thoughts on how he'd maximize the roster, because you've got a lot of potential platoon situations, batting order stuff, just different ways you'd handle this roster. And he's obviously very used to having to be flexible with how he manages because of a tighter payroll in Milwaukee, which, could include a lot of platooning at times. They've had to make the most of that 26-man roster to get every little ounce of it to win. So I'd be curious to if he could provide any insights onto what he thought of the current roster and how he might play it as it is. And I'm sure there's a lot of scenarios they go through, but I don't know if it's fair to ask him about the current roster, but something that was on my mind along with all the things you brought up. Like I said, that's why I thought teaching and this all went through very quickly. Available coaches. Somebody brought this up to me on Twitter today. I was talking about, how San Diego's got a coaching or managing opening now because Bob Melvin's gone and Bob Melvin took over in San Francisco. Chances are he's going to let a lot of coaches go. The Mets, we'll see who goes from there. The Angels, I hate to say, but anybody who probably worked for the Angels might be a little bit tainted, although I think Matt Wise got a job already. And then Houston, there's a lot of coaches who might be looking for work that won't be retained when the new manager comes on. One guy in particular that I was pointed out on Twitter by was Ruben Niebla. So if whoever takes over in San Diego, which they could retain Bob Melvin or they could retain Ruben Niebla because they're talking about either Ryan Flaherty or Mike Schilt to get this job, who are already currently on the staff. So maybe they just retain everybody and they just move one of these guys up. But to your knowledge, is there anybody out there that you think you'd want to bring in from any of these organizations? Because, Ruben Niebla is a no-doubter. I look at San Francisco, and obviously they interviewed Craig Albanez. Obviously I really want him in Cleveland. That's my top choice for anything here. But, Kai Correa's out there, who was with Cleveland briefly. Brian Bannister, Andrew Bailey, I know are highly thought of. Throwback from Indian stuff for you. Wayne Kirby and Joey Cora were both the Mets' first and third base coaches this last year. Supposedly they had interested in Troy Snicker from the Astros. Anybody out there?
A lot of people really liked that Alyssa Nakin,
from San Francisco,
major league coach. I don't. In general, I kind of would be intrigued with Pedro Guerrero, who's their assistant hitting coach, Dustin Lind, who's another assistant pitching coach, and/or to me, it's like I know Craig Albanez, hey, catching, they love that, but their hitting coaches have done a really good job of maximizing, or Justin Vale, who's their hitting coach. So many guys like Lamont Wade wasn't anyone. Mike Yastrzemski was not anyone. They've actually been that team that has turned, found gold in lesser fines. So those would be the guys that the hitting coaches really stand out to me there.
I like that too. I was going to say also Phil Plantier, who was actually the Angels' assistant hitting coach this past year. I believe, if I remember right, he had a little bit to do with Gio Urshela's breakout in New York, because he was previously in New York. He had a lot of hands in developing some of the guys they've resurrected over there in New York before he left for the Angels. And interesting that Marcus Thames and Phil Plantier were actually both at one time hitting coaches with the Yankees, and now they're both working together with the Angels. And I feel bad for anybody who worked over there into that environment, but I do remember reading Plantier having a hand in helping out Gio Urshela break out at the minors. So I'd be interested in him. Troy Snitker we talked about a little bit. I know Gary Pettis is very well liked over the years. Who knows what'll happen? Most people in Houston think that Joe Espada is just going to be promoted from the bench coach role to the manager. So I would probably, if that happens, bet a lot of continuity stays there. I'd be interested in bringing Ruben Niebla home if that
100%.
If that becomes a possibility. Nothing against Carl Willis, but if you have, let's say Craig Counsell comes in and wants to build his own staff just for hypotheticals here, I'd pitch, hey, we really like Ruben Niebla. What do you think about Ruben Niebla? And find out what happens. Like I said, I do like Andrew Bailey from San Francisco. I do like Brian Bannister. Brian Bannister did a lot of good things in Boston as well. And like I said, I know Kai Correa was very well liked in Cleveland too. So all those guys would make a ton of sense. And yeah, listen, Aiken is very well thought of there. I don't know about him on the Mets. Wayne Kirby coached here. Did Wayne Kirby coach here? Or was that Baltimore? I think in Baltimore.
I can't remember if I'm being 100% honest.
Yeah.
Well, I know we had promised
AFL updates. Yep.
AFL updates, but we are kind of out of time on those, and I want to give them proper time. So tomorrow we promise that tomorrow we will get to the AFL. I know and we got to talk about the Lotter because there's some people who are taking some fantasy takes on him, and we got to explain why there's, not concern,
caution,
but why we have some thoughts, some caution on him, as well as why we have less on Kyle Manzardo and why Ryan Webb is, to me, one of the big stories of the AFL. Remember to rate and review, download daily. We appreciate all of you joining in every single day and keep the hits rolling. Thank you all, and go Guardians, go.